the Congressional Black Caucus, the conscience of our Congress, to raise issues, awareness impacting our states, communities, and this year is no different. We look to Senator Kamala Harris, who is our honorary co-host today, to bring forward a really important, timely topic to talk about the full range of reproductive health care, particularly in the Black community, and by centering Black women leaders like those we have in the Congressional Black Caucus, lifting up the voices of policy experts and advocates and all of you. We want to make sure that we have a robust conversation and, most importantly, have an opportunity to get all of you all involved back home in your state and local communities. My name is Jacqueline Ayers, and I'm the National Legislative Director for Planned Parenthood Federation of America. And in my role, I spend a lot of time on Capitol Hill observing the work of our strong CBC members to advance, not tear down, women's access to health care. And so we are proud to partner with them. But more than that, I think it's especially important to note that of all the caucuses and conferences and ways that members organize themselves on Capitol Hill, the Congressional Black Caucus has consistently, 47 of its 48 members are a strong 100% voting record with the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. So to be clear, this is a conversation we're going to dispel myths about stigma. We're going to have fun and celebrate Black women and our health. We are standing in solidarity with members of the Congressional Black Caucus who have always consistently, despite what you may have heard about stereotypes of the full range of reproductive health care, including access to abortion and supporting decisions to parent or not to parent. We are with the members of the Congressional Black Caucus, and particularly Senator Harris this year has been working to maternal mortality and closing disparity gaps. So our conversation and our experts together here are going to help us talk about that. We know that the decision to parent or whether or not to have a child, whether someone chooses pregnancy or chooses adoption, belongs to an individual. And at Planned Parenthood, we have always trusted for Black women to make their own decisions, not for the members in the Congress who oftentimes try to attack those access and those rights. We, as a healthcare provider, with nearly 700 health centers across the country, try to make sure that we center compassionate and trust and confidential trusted services to the patients that see us. Over 360,000 patients that we see each year are African American. This is an opportunity for us to actually hear from the practitioners and the advocates who are centering the experiences of Black women in the conversation. So today, I'm going to introduce each of our panelists, but I also want you all to make sure that this conversation is not just happening in this room. So we'll ask that you join us on social media. You can tag us at ppblackcom, as well as using the hashtag pp at CBCCF18, and hashtag stand with Black women. And we'll ask that you tag each member of our panel. We'll make sure to put their Twitter handles up for you or their organization so you can have that. But first, let me introduce our panel, and then I want to make sure that we're celebrating and centering our conversation and getting ready. So we'll start off with a little bit of inspiration after I introduce the panel by sharing with you a poem and illustration video that was made for Planned Parenthood to celebrate Black women. First, you're going to hear from Dr. Serena Floyd. Dr. Floyd is the medical director for the Planned Parenthood of Metro Washington. And I will tell you all, this has to be the busiest person ever in D.C. because somehow she manages to see patients, join us on Capitol Hill regularly to educate congressional and policy aides. And she has been a fellow working with the Physicians for Reproductive Health Care and so many other things. So I'm glad that Dr. Floyd is going to both center and share with us both her advocacy voice, but how important the patients that she sees each day. And then following that, you will hear from Elizabeth Dawes-Gay, who is the co-director of Black Mama Matters Alliance. And this is an initiative that's focused on serving Black maternal health care rights and justice. And she works, if you have spare time, also works with Susu Consulting, and she works with organizations and individuals advancing social, racial, and reproductive justice for women of color. Her life's mission is to create a world where women of color have what they need to achieve health and well-being. And next to her is Aza Narati, Executive Director of Mama Toto Village, a local group here in DC. We're so glad to have her. Nonprofit organization is focused on training and providing perinatal community health workers with some of Washington DC's most high-risk mothers. She's also homeschooling, a mother of 3, has her master's degree in marriage family therapy, and she is also a midwife. So all of these people don't really have time to be here, but they're taking out time for us and for all of us to learn from their brilliant minds. And then following that, we'll hear from Dr. Crystal Redmond, who's the Executive Director of Spark Reproductive Justice Now. She has over 10 years of experience in managing low-income and women-focused public policy, health access, and community-based youth development programs, has previously served as the Senior Project Director for Maternal and Child Health at the Georgia Department of Public Health, and has worked in her career on creating greater access for women throughout the state of Georgia. Is a strong reproductive justice partner who has worked with Planned Parenthood and so many of the reproductive justice organizations, is going to bring to our conversation today some information about reproductive justice and the intersectional lens of that work. So now that you have heard who our panel is, and I hope you have already started tweeting at ppBlackCom and tagging us, I want to begin just by celebrating Black women by bringing into this space Sonia Renee Taylor's poem, Evolve is the name of it. Planned Parenthood's 100th centennial celebration a couple of years ago. Sonia Renee Taylor, amazing activist and poet and artist, created this just for Planned Parenthood, but especially to center the lives and experiences of Black women and our access to reproductive health care.
Your great-grandmother sips gin slow in a speakeasy in Chicago or Detroit, stokes the flames of a pot-bellied stove in Alabama or Arkansas. She is cigarette fixed at precipice of red lips, tells a suitor, maybe your great-grandfather, maybe not, what she expects from his courting. There will be no hoarding pleasure in her house. Your great-grandma was fast. And ain't that what we call a woman well acquainted with the topography of a hostile world, yet unbowed to its backhand, a juke joint majesty, a siren of her own fire, a thing this world has endlessly tried to expire, but could not, which is why you are here today. Your grandmother cursed or never cursed, drank or never drank, knew men the way Job knew trials, or never knew sin at all. She was a country girl, or familiar with the infinite heat of a New York City street. She was sweet on a woman once they kissed and never told. She was Dominican or Irish, or golden brown as a Mississippi dirt road glinting in the sun. She has labored, whether with hand or with heart. She has known part and parcel of struggle, knew she was done birthing after birthing the child that birthed you, or knew others would follow. She has swallowed decades of discarded promises, made to look like men or money. She was choice-made flesh, long before we flung a pro around its neck and called those words movement. Movement is what she has always known, prone to survival, which is why you are here today. Your mother was never only your mother, never only lover or law clerk or domestic worker. Your mother was defiant, in a bathrobe and slippers, in a boardroom, in a bedroom, where she said no or yes or more, with a body like the one she taught you to own like your own good name. She is failed and flawed and fortune forged in flame, the best of what could be made of this starshine and clay, an inheritance of blood and grace, which is why you are here today. And we call this evolution. How one person becomes billions by splitting an idea like an atom. How a notion as simple as every woman should be the absolute mistress of her own body could collect us like rainwater, Deliver us here, queer and trans, man, and none of the above, but out loud love and the certainty that a true word spoken 100 years later is still true. You deserve every option available to you in service toward your best life. There is no light brighter than the blaze of resistance. Evolution is the insistence that we must grow or die, which is why we are here today. Redefining the way we see each other with wider vision, carrying a great-grandmother's mission forward like a seed tucked in the pocket of humanity. We are not tasked with the awesome calling of making a tree. We are tasked with the noble work of nurturing good soil, a place where we each might grow and toil toward a self-determined truth, where trans women, undocumented youth, little black boys playing alone in parks each make it home safe at night, where the light of morning kisses them awake. The work of evolution is not to figure out what the next 100 years will make. The work of evolution is to plant the seed that will grow into something that from this precipice of history we simply cannot see or know. Nevertheless, will grow until you are the furthest point on a map of a future that looks 100 years back, perhaps through tears of gratitude to a crowd that looks exactly and nothing like you or us. But nevertheless, I trust will say that is why I am here today, and we will call this evolution.
I love that video because it reminds us that we live full lives, that we are not, that we are intersectional people, that we have the full range of our bodily autonomy and all of our options as Black women. And so I thought that was an appropriate video to start our conversation. We're first going to hear from Dr. Serena Floyd about her experiences serving the Washington, D.C. Community, and particularly her Black women patients. I do want to, housekeeping note, let everyone know, your Stand With Black Women notebooks, those are for you. Those for you to take with you. But you have also a card in your seat for you to write questions. We have staff that will come around and collect those if you're going to have questions for our panel. So as we start to hear from our amazing experts, please make sure that you're taking notes and thinking about your questions for them. So let me begin with Dr. Serena Floyd. Just your introduction. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. Just a
So I think I'm a little bit thrown off because I thought this was going to be a question, but that's okay. I can go ahead and start. So I have been very, very fortunate in the journey that I've taken to end up where I am now. And it's kind of been somewhat circuitous in terms of my path to becoming the reproductive health specialist that I am today, because I started off in an earlier point interested in a different area of medicine, but I'm extremely, extremely glad that I wound up where I am in terms of being an obstetrician gynecologist, and then particularly glad that I have wound up where I am as a reproductive health specialist working with Planned Parenthood. And I think for me, oftentimes when I come to events like this, I am asked to present the provider perspective, but I think also the patient perspective through the provider lens. And it's always most valuable for me to do that through telling patient stories. Obviously, patients telling their own stories is always very, very powerful. But when you see the numbers of patients that I have seen, that I have been involved with their care, it's such a wide spectrum. And so I think, as this conversation and the theme of this panel, one of the things that I was asked to kind of focus on is, what do I see as the reproductive health care needs, especially as an OBGYN, how can I speak to that? What do I see as the reproductive health care needs of women, of Black women in particular? And I think to answer that, I have to first say, what are the overall health needs? And before I can even answer that, I have to be mindful of the context that influence overall health for Black women. And so to illustrate that, I think it's probably done best through a scenario. And so I'll give you the scenario of a patient that I'll just call Jackie. And Jackie is a woman who has 4 children and is desperately hoping not to get pregnant with a 5th because she can barely take care of the 4 children that she has. Jackie and her family, she is a single parent, live in an area where there are access to basic things that people assume you should have access to, like a grocery store with fruits and vegetables, or any other healthy food options, or being in an area where every restaurant is not a fast food restaurant. That's not her reality. So as a consequence, both she and her family have a relatively poor diet. So as a result of this, Jackie has ended up with diabetes. And unfortunately, because also in Jackie's area where she lives, there's very little employment. There's very little educational opportunities. She also does not have health insurance. So being able to find a provider to take care of Jackie is very, very difficult. But let's say through her being able to have access to the healthcare through the Affordable Care Act, she gets on Medicaid, and now she's like, okay, at least I've got health insurance, so now I can start this journey to making myself healthier so that I can take care of my family. But lo and behold, in the area where she is, there are not very many healthcare centers, healthcare clinics, places for her to go to get care. And particularly for individuals with Medicaid, it can be specifically difficult because there may be providers in that area, but they may be providers who don't accept Medicaid for the services that she's needing care for. So now, Jackie, with her diabetes, has not been able to get care for a long time because she finally got insurance, but then she still wasn't able to find a provider. So ultimately, let's say she finds that provider. She finally gets in the door and is able to see that provider, but that provider is looking at Jackie and already with a stereotypical lens is making assumptions about why she's been so delayed in getting her care. So this provider has, a bit of an attitude with Jackie and is kind of like, okay, you're finally here, so let me go ahead and manage your diabetes. I'll give you a prescription for, insulin and whatever else she needs to manage her health condition. So Jackie takes a prescription, she leaves, and she finds out how much these medications cost her. So then she's faced with the situation of, okay, either I get my insulin to manage my diabetes or I feed my children. So the choice, the decision is very clear, right? She's going to do what she needs to do to take care of her family. So she does not get that medication. So she goes back in to see the doctor, who sees that her blood sugars are still uncontrolled and says to her, why didn't you get the medicine I told you to take? Again, with this kind of attitude, because they assume that they know why she's not being compliant. So in that moment, she is feeling very uncomfortable and is losing what little trust she might have had in that provider. So by the end of that visit, despite kind of describing what her scenario is, still not really getting the empathy that she should be receiving. So by the end of that visit, she says in her mind, you know what, I'm not coming back to see this provider because I just don't want to feel like I'm being made to feel right now. So she doesn't. So she doesn't come back to that provider. But remember, it took her a long time to find that provider to begin with. So by the time she finds the next provider, her diabetes has progressed so much that now she's got severe kidney disease. And so now she's having to look at getting specialized care, which again, as a Medicaid recipient, is extremely difficult to do. And so the effects just kind of add up and add up and add up until, finally she's in a situation where she's on dialysis because she hasn't been able to get her medications managed. So her opportunities or availability to even begin to try to seek employment, educational opportunities, and her ability to take care of her family have diminished significantly. So I think, I tell that story to kind of give an illustration of how important it is that myself as a provider and other providers that I work with realize that there are so many other determinants that contribute to the health circumstances that the patients that we see have. And unfortunately, there are a lot of providers out there who do not realize, acknowledge, respect, or sometimes, I hate to say it, care. That the patients that they're seeing are having the difficulties that they are with being able to maintain their health in the way that they need to. So I think I don't, 5 minutes was what? I don't know where I am. I might need to wrap this up. But in any event, I have story after story after story that I could tell like that. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is again, working for an organization like Planned Parenthood gives me an opportunity to take care of patients that are otherwise so very marginalized in society. So whether it's that transgender male patient who I'm taking care of, who cannot get their depot shot anywhere else in the community, but who needs that depot shot because it's what suppresses their menstrual cycles, which is a cause of severe something that makes them very, very upset because it goes against what their gender identity is, or whether it's the patient who's in a violent situation and is with a partner who is trying to control her reproduction through sabotaging pills or forbidding, or refusing to use condoms or whatever that might be. And then in turn, in an effort to fully control her, becomes even more abusive when she makes any types of efforts to be able to control her own fertility. No matter what the scenario is, we see a lot of different patients come through our doors in a lot of different circumstances. And I just feel very fortunate that I work in a place for a company with people that realize that there's so much more that you need to be thinking about when you are taking care of patients.
Thank you, Dr. Floyd. And I'm going to make sure we have Elizabeth be able to tell us a little bit about what Black Mamas Matter is and your work.
Thank you. First, thank you to Planned Parenthood for creating this space and for inviting us. And I want to also thank Senator Kamala Harris for co-hosting this session. She's been a great champion on Black maternal health. She recently introduced the Maternal Care Act and is one of the few pieces of legislation that actually talks about Black women, racial disparities, racism, implicit bias. So these are things that we have to continue to name and that our policymakers need to name if they're actually going to create real change on maternal health in the United States. So I applaud her for that. Black Mamas Matter Alliance is a Black woman-led cross-sectoral alliance that works to advance Black maternal health rights and justice. And by cross-sectoral, I mean we have people who are policy advocates, who are researchers, who are lawyers, human rights lawyers, who are care providers, and other types of folks that are really coming together to figure out how they can best work together to create some momentum on this issue. We serve as a national voice and coordinating entity for Black women-led initiatives that are concerned with advancing Black maternal health. And we uplift the work of locally based, community-based organizations, again, that are led by Black women and that center our issues. We provide technical assistance and trainings, and we also connect community stakeholders to what we call mainstream stakeholders who need to be in conversation if they're going to, again, create meaningful progress, right? So you need to be listening to the community, have an ear to the ground to understand what we care about, what we need, and how public health programs and policies can make a difference. We are grounded in the reproductive justice and birth justice frameworks, and we have a set of values that's available on our website, but these values focus on recognizing intersectional oppression, recognizing the need for racial justice, respecting community knowledge and leadership. We know that we have the answers within our communities, and also fighting for Black lives. So we believe Black mamas matter, and we believe that Black lives matter. I'll talk a little bit about two of the key events that we have that are becoming sort of our premier events. We're a new effort, so the steering committee came together in 2016, and we've since evolved to have co-directors and an advisory committee. But one of the things that we did earlier this year was called Black Maternal Health Week. And that was a large-scale online and in-person effort to really bring attention to the issue of Black maternal health in the United States. Through Black Maternal Health Week, we also amplified the voices of Black mamas, of women, families, and Black stakeholders, and we galvanized local actors and communities to organize on Black maternal health. One of the key messages from Black Maternal Health Week was to invest in Black women-led efforts, because those efforts that are, again, based in communities, led by people of color who have the experience, who have knowledge, who have these close connections and conversations with community members, have the answers, and they need the resources to do the work that they're doing. So that's one of the key things that happened. We're also planning a conference that's happening in December called the Black Maternal Health Conference and Training Institute. And it's the first national conference of its kind. But we're going to bring together, again, those stakeholders from across sectors, clinicians, public health and policy professionals, advocates, and other types of folks who are working to improve maternal health, especially from a birth and reproductive justice framework. Our goals for the conference are to build capacity of these leaders so that they can shape programs, policy, and care and engage in evidence-based advocacy. And we also want to create a space where folks can share information, exchange best practices, and really start to come together to grow a network, to find others who they can work with, who they have synergy with, and because our idea is that the work that's collaborative is better work, high quality work, and will actually make a difference for Black mamas. One of the things that I want to mention before I stop with the intro is that during Black Maternal Health Week, our motto sort of emerged. And this came from like a summary that I did in Rewire News about Black Maternal Health Week. And that motto is to listen to Black women, to trust Black women, and to invest in Black women. We know that Black women have the knowledge, the wisdom, and a wealth of information to share. And so it's important that as patients, as people going about their regular lives, as advocates, as policymakers, as leaders, that we listen to what Black women have to say. We also have to trust Black women, and I appreciate those folks who launched the Trust Black Women movement several years ago. So we need to, when Black women are speaking, actually believe what they're saying. We know our bodies, we know our communities, and so trusting us is key to, again, creating meaningful change and sustainable progress. The third thing is to invest in Black women. As I mentioned earlier, we've done meaningful work for our communities that's been under-resourced for so long. And I think it's important to imagine what the world could look like if Black women had all the resources that they needed to do the work that we're already doing. So we're doing so much for our families, for our communities, for the world. But imagine what we could do if we had really rich financial resources to scale up all of our efforts and impact the world. So I'll stop there, and I'm looking forward to getting a little bit deeper into some more of what we're doing and some of the policies that we're advocating.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I'm going to have Azza go on next. If you've just come in to join us, please take a seat. Join us at ppblackcom for the conversation. And Azza, we'll have you introduce and tell us about Mama Toto.
Hello, how's everyone? So Mama Toto Village is a perinatal family support organization. We're located in Ward 7 in the district. Our work centers along two components. So one dynamic is creating pathways for women of color to enter into the maternal child health and human service and social service professions. And then the other side of our mission is to create support and services which are wraparound and comprehensive to women of color in a way that they can have self-determining paths to parenthood and really expanding wellness, the way in which we conceptualize wellness for women outside of the episode of pregnancy. In terms of how we frame our work and the work that we do, we use a 3 generations approach. So for those of you who are in public health, you know, the 2-gen models generally involve parent-child dyad or mother-baby or a birthing person, however person is self-identifying. But it really just includes a dyad of 2, so mom and baby. And so we realized that in communities of color, just centering on the mom and baby really is not efficient if we're thinking about how are we creating change along a life course. And so we approach a situation where when we think about stability and we think about that family creating new legacies of well-being for themselves, that we have to incorporate the generation before. And so we look back to grandma or whoever that mother's social support system is and try to bring stability to that whole unit. Our primary population is Medicaid and Medicaid eligible women, even though we do serve all women in the district. But in those models, we see that oftentimes there has been economic instability, oppression that has been passed down from generation to generation. And so in order to break that, we have to create stability. And now, obviously, grandma is not 70 anymore. Grandma's 40. And grandma may be 35. And grandma may actually have a baby, too, that's 9 months old. And so we have to think about, for us in our model, like how are we creating a stability within that unit where grandma can now become an advocate for well-being and change, and that in turn impacts daughter because that mother is looking to that mom as her sole support, but she listens to her, right? She's not, I mean, she kind of listens to us, but her mom has a more powerful voice, right? That's her experience. And then how in turn does that then change the life course of a whole family? And that child who's going to grow up and become a teenager, how do they think about their reproductive health and well-being? How are they navigating that based upon the knowledge that we've planted with that first and second generation? So that's kind of the context of how we approach all the work that we do. One of the ways in which we create access, which is another key point, well, let me back up. There's 2 key points. Key point 1 is that we train women from the communities that we serve. We believe that the answer is always in the community. And so the community is our greatest asset and resource. So all of the women who work in Mama Toto are Black women and women who identify as women of color. And so we train those women. We provide them with opportunities. So half of our women were previous clients or women from our impacted communities. The other half are career changers. So lawyers, MPH people, like all types of previous backgrounds. And so all those women come together and they deliver services to women who are on Medicaid. So we contract with Medicaid managed care organizations in a district so that the services are accessible, so that women can receive support along the perinatal experience. That includes helping women navigate social services, the maternity care system, helping women achieve stability based on what that looks like for them, helping women reconceptualize what they believe wellness to be in their own lives, and really helping women think about their reproductive choices. And so choosing, do I want to have another baby or do I not want to have another baby, but making sure that they have enough information to actually make that choice in an informed way. We also support women during the birthing process who choose that. And then on the postpartum side, which in our society is sorely neglected, we provide comprehensive support in the home. So 4 hours during the day, 8 hours overnight, really providing in-home care for women who actually need it and who identify as having little social support systems. So yeah, that's our work.
Thank you. And we want to learn, Dr. Redmond, tell us about, let's see, did we go past your name? There you go, Spark Reproductive Justice.
Yes. Make sure this is, okay, good. So Spark Reproductive Justice now, we are a grassroots organization, reproductive justice organization. See one of my RJ sisters in the crowd. Located in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'll speak a little bit more about why specifically Atlanta, just discussing the history of reproductive justice. But I know that especially with, this current administration, there's been a lot of talk like RJ and reproductive justice has become this very cute thing. And for those who have been working in RJ movement, it's not cute at times. This shit is hard. And I'll also explain that too as well. But we're an RJ organization located in Atlanta, Georgia, been around for 11 years. We center Black women, women of color, and queer and trans young people of color. So you'll hear me say a lot of like just cutie pock or whatnot. Folks, we go beyond just the historical RJ framework. So we center beyond the womb. So when we speak about, womb-centered issues, we're not speaking about our communities. We're not speaking about all communities. We're not speaking about all Black women. So when you speak about reproductive justice, try to isolate reproductive justice, reproductive health, and reproductive rights. And I want to kind of frame this framework. I believe RJ is the blueprint to reproductive health and rights. It kind of guides and helps us navigate where we are and keeps us grounded. And if you truly know RJ, you know it's rooted in the history of oppression and on the backs of Black women and women of color. So I know we spoke a lot about just, navigating healthcare systems, navigating our communities and how we choose and this choice word and everything. But let's really dissect choice and talk about just history in general, history of eugenics, history of population control, speaking about just full bodily autonomy, self-determination. So when you speak about choice, historically, we've never been given a choice. It's never been our choice to do anything. So just kind of dismantling that. And when we even speak about rights, discuss the history of who's historically had rights and who has historically not had rights. So, reproductive justice encompasses all of that. So to just land it on being a womb of not having children to have children doesn't even begin to navigate just the real shit that happens in our day-to-day lives. Just being a Black woman, or being a woman of color, or being a trans woman. I know that, when you're speaking about even just reproductive health, just think of the trans woman who needs to preserve her sperm, or the trans man who needs to preserve her eggs, and think about the ways in which our folks need to navigate the healthcare system, not just to get access to a provider or access to insurance or what have you, but access to the appropriate services they need to choose what choice means to them, and not just like, I need an abortion or what have you, because abortion topic is very real. Folks need abortions. Abortion is a real thing, but then also think beyond the folks who needs an abortion, and think about the folks who would like to have a family, or maybe not, but think about how they create and navigate their own family. I believe that reproductive justice answers the why and the how. So we think about all of these things I just said, but then why? Why do we stand with Black women? Well, because we have to. Just because of our history, I think PP or Planned Parenthood has specifically said stand with Black women, not stand on top of them, beside them, behind them, in front of them. It's with Black women, because without Black women, there's nothing. To even dismantle, I mean, we can talk about history here. Dismantling the whole U.S. of the A, the building of this nation has been on the backs of Black women. So even just talking up here on this panel and discussing our health and access to all these systems and how we navigate just even getting to a provider and et cetera, you have to just think beyond that and what it really takes to actually navigate that choice framework. And just like I said, going beyond the womb. In addition to, I think I heard you speak a little bit about birthing justice, which is huge in reproductive justice, even for folks who are able to birth a child, thinking about what does birthing justice truly means behind bars or in front of bars, being shackled, and what the ability not even to have that choice of if I can be shackled because I'm a danger to escaping while I'm giving birth to a human being, which is ridiculous. Or just that justice even, when I say justice and dignity in front of bars, Serena Williams, ideally she speaks about her birthing story as a Black woman. Doesn't matter how much, I'm a public health doctor, so we talk about social determinants of health and, how your social economic status affects your health outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. That didn't mean nothing for her, and it's not, isolated at all, even, speaking of my birthing story. So I just would like for the audience to really think wholeheartedly about what it means to be centered in reproductive justice, and having not just using it as a quote-unquote framework because it's a nice term, but truly understanding what reproductive justice is and how you navigate that through the reproductive health and system. So I'll leave that there.
Thank you, because now we're ready to talk about it, right? We actually are ready to get into it with this amazing panel. And one of the things I actually wanted you all to address is if we're actually really going to have conversations about our bodies, about our health, about sex, right? We need to be able to be comfortable in our communities talking about sex. What are the stigmas that you see in your work that are preventing our community from having real, honest conversations about what people need to address the full range of healthcare throughout their lives? And or, maybe things are starting to change. I think there have been some examples of media and cultural changes that are starting to tear down that stigma, but it's certainly all too prevalent, keeping our communities from having these conversations. So talk to us a little bit about how you see stigma come up in your work and what you're doing to help dismantle that. And that's for any of you.
Well, I'll talk a little bit. So one of, there's several things, but I'm just going to highlight here because I wrote my notes out for it. but one of the things that I consistently see as a problem is that we create for and not with the community. And so when we are thinking about how we create solutions to problems, that is typically done not with the community, but it is done with a top-down approach. So there's generally folks who, a panel such as this will come together. We will pull a bunch of academics, and it's good that we need people to be able to interpret research, and we need people to be able to articulate the language of best practices. But if we are not bringing the community to the table to actually set the table, then we are actually recreating and recycling the same systems of oppression that created the problem in the first place. And so for me, like, one of the things that we do in our space is have an advisory council that consists of our clients. Because I believe, like I said earlier, that answers in the community. And if you're not tapping that community consistently, not just as a listening session, or not just let me have you do this survey so I can get your opinion, but actually having those community people at the table articulating, scripting their own narrative, and then people create solutions based on what people need, as opposed to what we think that they want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I can't see heads, so I'm like double dutch. I think I'll speak a little bit about like sex stigma, especially because I'm in Atlanta. So where historically there's just this abstinence-based, heteronormative, binary kind of approach to sex, which there's no like coincidence that like we're like super low on all of our health report cards across the spectrum, because it's like, oh, just don't ask, don't tell, and a Bible Belt plays. And I'm originally from California, so it was a huge shock when I moved to Georgia. Like, what's going on? So seriously, so it's like, first off, we don't talk about sex. And it happens. So, but we don't talk about sex. But then I would say part of dismantling that culture and trying to shift that is RJ groups, or just social justice groups have been putting on like larger conferences and workshops. Like we just concluded Sex Down South, which one of our board members, facilitates that. So I'm very proud of her. But no, we don't have enough conversations about what does sex truly look like, and we're not honest enough to not even honest enough, I'm sorry, but it's very taboo to have those type of conversations that need to be had, as well as it's so taboo to be like outside of the heteronormative spectrum, so we can't truly have honest conversations about how sex happens, and we can't, because we can't have conversations about how sex happens, we can't speak about pleasure. Sex isn't just this thing about like, oh, sex over here and then a kid, or STDs, like these things like don't exist just in one vacuum or whatnot. So until we start educating ourselves about the navigations of sex, we can't even get to pleasure. And because we can't get to pleasure, these conversations happen under the table, and it's just like you said, it's like all of this trying to dismantle stigma and taboo or whatnot. Is like this continuous perpetual cycle of stuff that we're not really talking about.
Yeah, one of the things I'll just add quickly is related to Black maternal health in the media, since you asked about that. And I think it's a real shame that this topic did not rise to the surface for the media and for other folks until Serena Williams told her story. There are so many other Black women who have dealt with that issue, who have dealt with worse, who are no longer here because of what happened to them. And so I'm in my advocacy very careful to sometimes not mention Serena Williams, because people see that celebrity and they see that story and they neglect the low-income women, the average woman, the low SES woman that people don't listen to and don't value, right? Serena's a superstar. People value her. People support her. But I think we need to create a culture where the average woman who you don't know, let's say in DC, for example, gets that level of attention when she has a bad experience, when someone does something, and a care provider disrespects her wishes, ignores her to the extent that she suffers badly because of it. And so that's just something I wanted to put on the table, that we need to care regardless of who's telling their story.
And Dr. Floyd, I was actually going to, because of Serena Williams, we know she's not an exception. Right. That happens all the time.
maybe a question for you is, what do we got to change about the healthcare field, right? And particularly, making sure that we have the kind of care and providers specifically that understand these realities.
So I think trying as much as possible, especially with the younger trainees that are coming through, to press upon them the importance of understanding things like implicit bias and institutional, structural, individual racism, things that they often don't even have on their radar. And I can again, as an obstetrician and as a mother who also had a similar situation where I am again an OBGYN physician who saw a provider who actually was a friend of mine and developed complications at the end of my pregnancy and kind of had it brushed off until I was like, no, I know that this is not right. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until that happened that I was like, oh, okay, we'll admit you and observe. And then, 48 hours later, I was having an urgent C-section to deliver my daughter. So again, this kind of story happens all the time. But I think for me, what's really important, since I do work with trainees, and I work in fields where I am working with different types of providers, so not just physicians, but nurse practitioners, midwives, physician's assistants, nurses, different groups of individuals, to constantly make them aware of the things that they often are not thinking about that are contributing to them continuing to be oppressive to the patients who are coming in to see them. And when it comes to stigma, because I kind of taking it back to the original question, how many people here have, obviously I'm an abortion provider. I'm proud to be an abortion provider. But that puts me in a very interesting situation because I am an abortion provider. Mm-hmm. And how many folks here have seen or heard about the billboard, the most dangerous place for a Black person is in the womb? Mm-hmm. Or how many people have seen or heard about the billboard that Black children are an endangered species? Mm-hmm. So you see things like that. I, as an abortion provider, have walked into a health center, and on my way into a health center, had someone else who was African American yell out to me, how can you go in there and kill your own people? Mm-hmm. Like, how can you go in there and perpetrate, genocide? And I'm thinking, like, how disrespectful is that to my patient to assume that she did not have, go through the careful consideration, have the wherewithal, the wisdom, the knowledge to make an informed decision for her body and herself. That's what you're saying, basically, is that this, I am making a decision for someone else, which is not at all, the situation. Or better yet, because abortion is not the only thing that I do, that it is one of the things I do, but I do many things as an OBGYN provider. And when I'm going into a clinic, I could be going in to manage an abnormal pap smear that has showed precancerous cervical changes. I could be going in to deal with someone who's got a breast mass. I could be going in, to place a contraceptive implant or to treat an STI. So it's that assumption, being in being part of the Planned Parenthood organization and being a provider within the organization, that stigma that Planned Parenthood has, that abortion has, and how it just overshadows so many other much more important issues that just kind of get squashed down. So I think it's important informing the people that I work with, the circles I work in, even if it's that resident who, is dismissing a patient's complaint of back pain because, she's a drug seeker. It's like, no. You need to really fully assess what's going on with this patient. So whether I'm talking to that resident and trying to educate them to the mistakes that they're making in their thought process in that moment, to if I'm giving a talk to a wider group of people to inform them of exactly what the scenarios are and situations are that our patients are facing, I think those are really important aspects of the work that I'm doing.
I love what Dr. Redmond had to say and what you, Dr. Floyd, had to say, which really you can tie together just with the mention I think you gave, Elizabeth, which is trust Black women, right? What if our policies, our policymakers, our elected officials actually started from bringing Black women to the table, right, before we decide to write policies? What if we did what Aza suggested and thought about 3 generations of what laws would impact and who they would impact before we decided to move forward? And all too frequently, we know that when policy decisions, when legislation is being drafted and written, and thank goodness for the work of Black Mamas Matter Alliance, I think Senator Harris's bill is one of the first that centered Black women actually sitting with Black women policymakers and making it happen. happen, but we know that there are too many gaps still left in the policy realm that allow these disparities to go on. So, Elizabeth, I would love for you to address where are the gaps in policies? How are our systems and structures and our laws set up actually to continue to perpetuate all of these concerns that we raised?
Yeah, so the issue of maternal health is complex and requires policy consideration on a variety of fronts. We actually recently did a survey of our Alliance members and found that obviously for a lot of people that healthcare, protecting access to healthcare by extending Medicaid coverage through the postpartum period, and ensuring that people have health insurance is a priority. So that's one of the more obvious areas that we need to continue talking about addressing, because our health insurance coverage is still not fully adequate for what women need during pregnancy and after pregnancy. The other thing that rises to the surface, especially for the Black Mamas Matter Alliance, is addressing disrespect, abuse, neglect, and discrimination within the healthcare setting. So we have a lot of stellar providers, two sitting next to me, care providers who actually provide holistic care to women, helping them, or to birthing parents, helping them navigate various social challenges to have good health. But there are a lot of providers who don't have that perspective, who believe that they can do whatever they want to Black bodies, and say whatever they want to people, who stigmatize Medicaid patients, who have actually turned Medicaid patients away and say, don't send your clients here, don't send those Medicaid recipients here, beneficiaries here. And so that's a really important issue for folks in the Alliance to deal with. And I think that's something that the legislation that we've seen come out recently has attempted to address through implicit bias training for providers. And I think I worry that implicit bias is going to become like another code word, and that we actually just need to say racism. We need to stop providers from taking racist actions, from being racist, from treating Black people poorly. That's a more clear definition. So I think we have some more evolving to do as far as policy is concerned, but that's certainly a priority. And then we have to address racism and the multitude of ways it shows up in our systems. And that's obviously a longer term sort of activity, but it's something we have to start thinking about and think about very carefully in order to make change on maternal health and other health issues. So a lot of the legislation related to maternal health that's come out is about, maternal mortality review committees and care providers and healthcare coverage, but I haven't seen anything that really connects social determinants of health like transportation and housing to maternal health, at least not at the federal level. So there are some programs, for example, in Boston and Ohio, or Columbus, Ohio specifically, that do make these linkages between, an expecting parent having appropriate housing and birth outcomes. So I would love to see more of that. Transportation, nutrition, the ability to access healthy food is a major issue that we've learned through focus groups. And Ozza probably knows better from the things that she's helps her patients or her clients with. But those are some of the things that we have to keep pressing on and get creative about.
Ozza, I want to bring you into this conversation to that last point Elizabeth is making, is that a lot of times people are not working at the federal level. Everybody is not, sitting in the Capitol here in the U.S. You're just miles away from the U.S., but the clients that you see are finding gaps in the systems locally, and would love for you to talk about, their experiences and how even at the local level policies need to do better to support Black women's choices.
The most common issues that, so for our program, we do address social determinants, and that is the pervasive issue. You can't even begin to think about caring for a baby or investing in the experience of pregnancy. That's a luxury for a lot of our clients. And so when you're thinking about having your basic needs met, when you're thinking about having safe and accessible housing, and safe not just meaning my neighborhood is safe, but housing that's not infested with mold or rodents, which is very common here in the district, where pregnant women in families are living in dilapidated homes that are not up to code. And so we're looking at failures in the system to actually hold accountable the people who are charged with providing housing to people in the district. And it's acceptable that people live in substandard housing and all the effects that has on your overall health, not just the experience of pregnancy. Food insecurity, as has been raised a couple times, is a significant issue in the district. You have, for example, east of the river and west of the river. West of the river people are living their best life, right? They have all the things. They have yoga and like little places for your child to go, and you have a Trader Joe's, and you just have all of these things that are available to you. And if you go east of the river, right, the people who live next to the Anacostia and the people who are in Ward 7 or 8, they have the highest level of unemployment. They have the highest level of single-family homes that are being reared by a mother-run home. The poorest education is in Ward 7 and 8. There was something that came out, it was like the DC policy, something, I can't remember what they're called right now, but they had this chart, and I was like, why would you even put this in the book? But the chart looked at indicator for well-being, right? And so for Ward 8, that indicator was negative 153%. The scale only went to 200, okay? But Ward 3 was 93%, right? And so we're looking at two distinct experiences in the district for a person who is well-to-do, generally a white person, and what it looks like for a black person. And generally in the district, people are here in the district, right? Their families have been here for a long time. And so I always think about how has poverty become generational? Poverty has been something that becomes inherited, and trying to get out of that cycle is so difficult for so many people. And so for us, we can't just approach a woman and say, oh, let's plan for your wonderful birth experience. When most of our clients, 1 in 3 of our clients show up not having a place to live, right? And so homelessness, when we conceptualize homelessness, is not the person, oh, they live on the street, but it's the woman who is jumping from couch to couch. It's the woman who doesn't have a home to call her own, or somebody who, I live with other people, but my name is not on the lease, and there's like 6 other people in the home, but I sleep on the sofa. And so we have a lot of transient women. We have a lot of women who just basic needs are not being met. A lot of women with mental health issues, right? And so mental health, again, for Black people, how we deal with mental health is not traditional, right? And so, again, for us, when we're looking at mental health, this is a whole nother conversation, but the stigmas that are associated with that, and how dysfunctional mental health affects your ability to actually access care, and whether or not you will choose to access care. Most of our clients have what I call situational depression, right? If their life were different, they wouldn't feel the way that they feel, and would actually have motivation to live and do more in their life. And so we try to approach them from that particular perspective. To the point of policy, and this is local, national, state, or what have you. I think for me, the one issue that I see over and over is this singular solution to maternal health, this singular solution to addressing social determinants. I think now the hot topic is like, oh, we need more midwives and doulas. Like, more midwives and doulas are not going to solve the problem of racism. And I think that when we start to think about racism as we think about any other infectious disease, right, it needs to be looked at in that way of how an infection gets inside of your system, and it kills system by system, organ by organ, right? And if you don't treat that infection, it could be as simple, I got a cut, I wasn't paying attention to it, that infection spread, it caused sepsis, and I died. So if we don't think about racism in that same light, that is categorized the same way, in how an infection spreads, and it affects our mind, it affects our body, it affects our life chances, I think until the highest levels of government acknowledge racism in that way, I don't think that we're ever going to get to the root, right? We're never going to get to treating the actual disease. We will constantly treat symptoms, right? So reproductive justice is fueled out of a disease, right? And so we look at that like, oh, well, let's treat housing. Let's treat that. That's a symptom. Or let's treat implicit bias. That's a symptom, but we're not treating the root, which is racism.
I feel like we're writing legislation in this room right now. We have all the ideas. So we make sure that members of the Congressional Black Caucus are in the 116th Congress. So we're introducing the Comprehensive Reproductive Justice Vision Bill. Elizabeth, you and I are going to work on that.
Can I add one more point?
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
The other thing is that I think also thinking about that the face of like reproductive justice needs to be Black women and not white women. And my fundamental problem with like feminism, there's many problems, but one of my problems with that is that in a lot of times feminism is aligned with reproductive justice or like our RJ framework or whatever the language is that people are speaking. But the problem is that when Black women were going through the experience of enslavement, white women watched that happen, right? And white women upheld that system at the expense of Black women and oftentimes punished Black women for being raped or not having autonomy over their body to make those decisions. And so I think it's deeply problematic when white women try to elevate themselves and act as if our experiences are aligned. I think that white people need to get better, especially white people in this work need to get better. When you see a Black woman not being centered, when you see that you have Black women in your organizations, but you are the face of a service that's being delivered in communities of color, you need to question why you're okay with that. And align yourself better in a way as an ally and not a leader for issues that are pertaining to and dealing with Black people. There's enough Black people and enough educated and capable Black people that you walk by that are able to lead that work. You should be there as a supporter, whether that's through resources, your knowledge, skills, and ability, or your connection to the people that have those resources as a way to create access and a pathway for Black women to then elevate themselves. Like, we don't need other people to solve our own problems. I believe that we have the capacity, but we're always being stunted. Every Black woman in this room can probably speak to an experience where they've been stunted by oftentimes a white woman who says, I align with your issues, and being able to solve the problems that they see.
Come through. So that's right. Let's get to that. Right? What's the actions? Right? Because I love what she had to say about the fact that there are enough Black women. Right? We often hear, particularly in the hiring space, right? We couldn't find diverse candidates. We didn't know where to look. We don't know anybody. We don't know who's going to write these policies, who's going to do these programs. Right? But let's talk about the actions, the opportunities, really to center Black women in this work of expanding access to health care. Dr. Redmond, would love to start with you because I know that it's actually what you do is actually bring young people. You are bringing young people into the movement to lead their own voices, and so that young people of color can start off knowing that they're supposed to be leading the conversations.
Absolutely. And one thing I will say to piggyback off of what you were saying is that yes, we have. I mean, we're everywhere. We're all of everything, and we are. And then, so also, you have to understand too as well. Just because like a primarily white organization hires a Black woman to be an organizer doesn't mean now that organization has this like. This all-inclusive, diverse framework, and now that they're a reproductive justice organization because that Black woman is an RJ, advocate or leader, and then now they can do RJ work. So, like, that needs to be said too as well. Like, I just want to know that. I just want that to be said too as well because yes, we exist and we're out there. But you can't just pick and choose and just select this token person to lead this work and say, yes, now I'm the face of this organization and this organization is doing so well because I'm doing well. Like, that's not the way shit goes. It's great to have Black women in the organization, and I think it's even better to have more. and even better to have, leaders who are Black women too as well. So so I want to, cap that off with saying that too as well. And then also I want to speak about dismantling shit. Like, one, there's power in creating our own things and not just feeling like we have to pull up a chair and sit at the same table. I know everyone's always saying, like, create your own table, but really, what does that mean? And then also, what does it mean in the RJ movement where funding is very competitive, partnerships are very competitive. When we speak about just RJ, we're not just speaking about Black women. They're all like women of color. So when Black women are like the lowest scale of leaders in the RJ movement that are funded, I mean, I'm not going to break down the scale, but I want to say there's others. You want to break it down? Okay. Well, no, but in all seriousness, I think it is Asian folks. There are then Hispanics and Latinx folks, and then indigenous and those who identify as being indigenous, and then like down there, it's Black women. Like, oh wait, y'all can't even see that. It's like Black women. So I forget the exact percentage, but I think we get like maybe 5% of the funding in the RJ world, and then which creates tension amongst reproductive justice movement leaders too as well, because we collectively are working together, but then when systems say we are not because collectively they put money into another group over another, that's telling me right then and there, money talk, bullshit walks. Like, if you're not funding my movement, then that means you're not really, am I not supposed to be cursing? I'm sorry, because I curse a lot. But if you're not funding this work, you're telling me through your dollar that you don't trust me. You're telling me through your dollar that you do not stand with me. So I do want to establish that too as well in the conversation, and repeat the second half of your question because I needed to say that.
I wanted you to talk a little bit also about the young people who
Absolutely.
you're bringing into this movement to be leaders as well.
Okay, well, with that being understood, it's very important that we also center young folks. Like I said in the beginning, Spark, we center cutie POC folks, specifically young queer and trans and GNC folks, or what have you, because we know, especially in the South, that's where leadership is taking place. We know that we need to start centering those leaders and really just like giving them the support and the resources they need to be centered in the movement too as well. When we are at the Capitol, when we are doing actions, when we are just out in community, those are the folks that show up. Historically and just like perpetually, they always show up. And thank you, yeah, because y'all there and everything. They do show up, and it's difficult, one, to get these folks to show up because school is real, paid labor is real. Even in Georgia, I'm sure in other spaces that sex work is super real, especially when you speak about GNC and trans folks or what have you, or under the table labor. So to get 20 young folks at the Capitol is a huge win for us. And so when folks arrive at the Capitol, it's even more powerful to have your legislators hear you speak. Unfortunately, that's not what happens all the time. Unfortunately, we're sometimes just standing outside of the Capitol and speaking to the same people we always speak to. So we need to collectively, as we continue to build and shift power, we need to strategically discuss what that power means, because I feel like a lot of folks say, like, yeah, shift culture and dismantle and what have you, but what does that truly look like, and what does that mean to communities that have, as I said earlier, historically been marginalized and oppressed?
Thank you. And yes, this is a 501c3 organization and panel, but we should talk about the opportunities to take action in November. There are more women of color running for office than ever before, so we got to change the people who are making the decisions at the tables. And that's a nonpartisan statement.
Yes, appreciate that, yes.
I want to give others the opportunity to ask questions. And so just a quick reminder, you do have note cards in your seat that you can write a question. We'll get your questions up here and have a chance. So either Nia Martin Robinson, if I could shout out, our Director of Black Engagement at Planned Parenthood. And Nia is a big part of the group of Black women at Planned Parenthood who came together to work with a local DC artist to start the Stand With Black Women logo, T-shirt, buttons, get your moleskin notebooks, because Nia is helping us live that out loud, right, and partnering with the reproductive justice organizations and women of color-led organizations that we want to stand with. And so we want to make sure that you guys have those things and take that with you. You're going to see that more and more in the work, because I think it's real. What Crystal had to say is that you can't always show up the same way every single time when you are with majority and white women traditional organizations should get uncomfortable and shift, right, how they're doing work. And so thank you to my colleague Nia, who is doing that. So for people who have questions, Travis, Nia, Cece, we have folks who are staff in the room who will gladly take your question. While they're coming up here, maybe Dr. Floyd, I would love for you to also talk about advocacy from the healthcare professional standpoint. So it's not just sort of youth and our movement leaders, but also why is it important for voices of providers to take time to talk to policymakers?
I think, well, unfortunately, a lot of what we have to say in terms of, particularly when it comes to discussing the realities of either evidence or just science or anything else. Unfortunately, with this administration, a lot of that just gets completely disregarded, which is very frustrating. But that doesn't mean that we still shouldn't be at the table, because there are individuals, especially in the policy world, who are interested in really understanding and knowing some of the things that we've already been talking about today. And I think as healthcare providers, so for me as a female, as an African-American female, as an OBGYN physician, others like myself are in unique positions because we can speak to so many different aspects of what's important when we're looking at some of the legislation that's coming through, or just even some of the statements that are made, and just kind of dispelling myths, correcting misinformation. And so for providers, the advocacy, it can be tricky because, again, we're providers, but the advocacy really, I think we have a unique position and ability to be fairly powerful, especially on the Hill. So most events that I get asked to attend, like, it's always wear your white coat, wear your white coat, bring your white,
That's me she's complaining about.
No, it's not actually. It's not actually. Almost everything that anything I participate on the Hill, it's always wear your white coat. Because as physicians, people, for the most part, tend to value the education, the experience that we can, and that background that we can bring to any conversation. And there's a level of respect that comes with being a physician, whether it's deserved or not. But there is a level of respect that comes, and so you have an ability in this role to speak with a sense of with some authority. But I think the other thing too, particularly for those of us that really do participate a lot in advocacy work, is this extremely intense desire to be a voice for our patients who otherwise may not have that voice. So I can, in some of the examples that I've given today already and talked about some of the patients that I've seen, there are many, many, many more stories. And even if I'm just going up to share those stories, as a provider, what it means to me having, trying to take care of these patients. But then in some cases, as a provider, some of the legislation that's directly affecting me, whether it's talking about criminalizing my ability to provide abortion, preventing me from being able to talk about abortion, no matter, what the issues are. Like, I think as a physician, I have a position where I can speak very clearly to people who oftentimes may listen more than they may listen to certain other groups.
And it's really important that you brought into all of the terrible things this administration is trying to do to roll back access to reproductive health care, and the Trump administration issuing the domestic gag rule that would prevent providers from being able to provide full information about abortion options to their patients. In fact, putting you in a position to not give the best health care at times. These are the positions that this administration stands for, and we have to keep holding folks accountable that they will speak out against these things. Please do pass your questions in. The first question that we have says, there is some research showing weathering when it related to Black maternal mortality. Are there studies that link weathering to broader health issues beyond the womb?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. No, do you want to? No, he's speaking. Go ahead. I can't be.
So when we talked about racism and toxic stress and how it connects to maternal health, but maternal health is only one of the areas where we see that affecting Black lives. It is also related to heart disease, to obesity, to a shortened lifespan. So Black people die, or at earlier ages than white people. And people have pointed to the weathering hypothesis, as well as, some of the violence that is perpetrated against Black communities, and the lack of resources and access in our communities. So it's not just related to maternal health. It's really across the spectrum.
Can you talk about the weathering? Because some people aren't.
Weathering is a hypothesis proposed by Arlene Geronimus, that says that chronic stress from racism affects our DNA, telomeres, little ends of DNA, and actually shortens our lives and leads to poor health. Do you want to say more about it?
Sure. So this is more just on the other side, but one of, like, in that, it basically, if you were to imagine like a chain, right? And so what that weathering is doing, and you may not see it right away, right? So it creates something called a diastasis, or a disease state. And so on everybody, let's take your DNA chain, it creates weak links in the chain. Mm-hmm. And so while it's why we think that diabetes is genetic, like, oh yeah, my mom had diabetes, that means I'm going to get it. Like, you may have a propensity for diabetes, and if you do certain things over your lifespan, you may be more likely to acquire that. Mm-hmm. And so what ends up happening with weathering is that it creates all of these weak links, and when you start to put more pressure on those links, that chain breaks, and that looks like disease. I think, yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, so I don't see any other note cards. Okay, we have another note card coming, and then we'll do questions, and I want to ask each of the panelists to tell these folks how they can get involved in your work. If you have conferences, websites, want to make sure that they leave with a little bit more information about how to stay connected to you. Sorry, is it better if we let you just ask from there? Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to start with my second question. So this is for Dr. Floyd, Dr. Redmond. Thank you. If you are married or with someone at the moment, how supportive is your partner of you as a women's rights and reproductive rights activist? And have you ever felt the need to defend your line of work against their mentality?
Yeah, I mean, my partner is great. Actually, a lot of, like, just my, am I really loud? I feel like I was being loud. Okay. A lot of my colleagues and even legislators and everything has met my partner and my baby. Just like, I bring them to a lot of places. I'm surprised they're not here. But imagine my partner is this, like, 6'2", big Black guy with dreads wearing shirts that say "Support your local abortion provider." That's him. And I dare you to say anything, kind of guy. But either way, no, I've never thought about shifting anything I've done for anyone. And then also, I think that what helps is just having that support system. Yeah, I mean, does that answer some of your question? Okay.
So I'm going to start by saying that's my daughter. And since her father is my husband.
Right.
You know the answer.
She has somewhat of an idea of the answer. But just in terms of it in general for the audience, with this kind of work, it can be very difficult. It can be very draining. It can be very emotionally taxing. It can be exceptionally rewarding. Mm-hmm. And so having a support person who can be there when you need that shoulder to cry on, because mm-hmm. it has been the day from hell, or that person who can celebrate those small or great victories with you is huge. And I do have that in my partner. I do work a lot, so there's always that balance between family and work, and even though there may be support from a partner, sometimes there's still that desire or that longing to have you home with them. But I think the bigger picture and just the pride in the work that I'm doing is what's seen and kind of what comes through.
Okay, we're going to have time for this last question, and as a part of your answers, we'd love for each of you to talk about what's getting you through, because it is a good point. Right now we're dealing with a lot, right? There's a lot going on. So what is keeping you and getting you through? This question says, in what spaces within the reproductive justice movement have you seen grow under this restrictive Trump administration? There's a lot being thrown at us right now, so
I think we've had these conversations. I think that it has forced people to not be. It has created a space of uncomfortability, right? And so when people are uncomfortable, you actually start to see movements towards change. I think that we felt comfortable for a while, and not to say that people weren't still speaking out about things, because things were still happening and things were actually starting to amplify. But I think this administration has created, you see it on a political level where, as you mentioned earlier, like more Black people and more Black women are actually running for office, and people who probably wouldn't have traditionally run and are winning, right? And so I think it is invigorating this new generation of grassroots organizers, of leaders that are emerging from the community and are shifting the conversation and really, I think, upending traditional politics in a way that is surprising for some people. I think the conversation of reproductive justice and maternal health, like all of those things are being amplified in this current administration, has been my observation.
And what's getting you through?
Netflix, like I'm pretty. I think, Mama Toto was created actually to be a safe space for people of color. And so it actually, I actually find overwhelming joy, even though there are so many difficult experiences, because we hold the stories of our clients. And we see all the things that they have to deal with every single day. But I think actually having other women to walk this path with is just and to go to work and see women who look like me every single day, like that is my reality, it's amazing. And then having a really, really supportive partner who supports the work and supports what I believe is my life's work.
Others, how have you seen this administration grow the movement, and what's getting you through?
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No. I think the thing that I think of most often, and first when this question comes up, is just how many people have been so much more willing to share their story. I work for Planned Parenthood, and with abortion being constantly under fire, just the number of people who are willing to come out and say, that was me. I had to have an abortion for XYZ reason. And I think with all of the craziness that this administration has brought, one of the positives has been the fact that people, in an effort to kind of come together and work together and address and face some of the problems that we're having to deal with, are willing to be more vocal about their personal experiences, which I think is extremely important, because it really drives home that, it's not them. You really start to realize, okay, that 1 in 4 number of women who has an abortion, that's the person sitting next to you, your coworker, your friend, your family member that you may not have known before, but now they're they're deciding to be vocal about it because they want to support what we're trying to do in this reproductive rights fight. So that's one thing that to answer the first question. To answer, what gets me through, I think, my family. I also have a 3-year-old and then a 10-year-old, in addition to the 18-year-old, and my husband. And I think that's my safe space. So it's hard sometimes with what we see and what we do to leave that out at the door when you come home. Like oftentimes, I may stress at night about a particular, patient or situation that I came across, but I really, really do make an effort to leave that at that door, and my family helps me to be able to do that, because when I get home, it's usually all about them, so I can to some extent compartmentalize. I think the other thing that really helps to get me through are my patients. When no matter how difficult a particular day might have been, that one or two patients who comes up to me and gives me a hug and says, "Thank you so much for being here for me, for doing what you do," it just makes all the difference in the world. So I think that those are things that help to get me through.
Thank you.
I think this administration has opened everyone's eyes to the fact that they're not safe. The only safe group of people are wealthy white men. And so everyone else is at risk, right? And what happens when you're backed into a corner? You start fighting. There is no surrender. There is only fighting. We will continue fighting. And I think people have sought out different places to do that. So that could be with Black Mamas Matter Alliance, with Spark, with other folks who are organizing on the ground. I think that's the best thing that the administration has done for us, is really help people become woke, the woke movement. And I think about how they are going to do things differently, how they're going to get out and vote, how they're going to organize, how they're going to contribute and volunteer their time, how they're going to bring others with them. And that's really critical, and that's going to help us in the near future. What keeps me going is this hope, right? Hope because I see people who weren't acting before starting to take action, and also hope because we're taking these steps. Regardless of how small they are, each step is important. And so that has really helped me to believe that we will continue to make progress, that we're going to do this one step at a time. And yes, having a supportive partner is highly critical. I honestly have been able to do half the things I've done and been half the places I travel to and go across the world, advocating without a supportive partner, without someone to hold it down, because it is draining, it's tiring, and just having a solid support network, whether that be a partner or friends or family, whoever. I think you have to find your village and ask for help when you need it, and professionally and personally. So that's my 2 cents.
Before we leave you, Elizabeth, tell people how they can find out about the conference in December. What's the website?
Yes, the conference. You can find out more information about the conference at blackmamasmatter.org/BMHC. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Registration is open, so please do join us to learn more about how you can engage in this work to improve Black maternal health.
And Crystal.
Yeah, so I would say that everything everyone has said for sure, and I also think what has shifted is we've had this idea of like allyship, and me personally, I prefer not to use the term because it denotes you of any type of responsibility to actually take action, and I feel like many people have moved away from allyship and actually have become accomplices and have stood with people. I mean, even just stand with Black women, like have actually began to take action and stood with Black women and stood with historically marginalized groups and stood with trans women and just been at actions that actually started to take some action. So I feel like, not that it's perfect, not that it's, everywhere and everything, but I do feel like white folks specifically are starting to understand, like I said, not everyone, but there are, folks who have been allies, historically allies with movement, are now shifting from just this idea of like allyship, I can just sign this petition and I'm with you when you're not and everything, and just trying to understand a little bit more of what does standing with me truly mean and what does it look like and how do you put that into action, like what's an operational definition of what I need to be doing. So I think that that's one thing that I've started to see a little bit more as the administration has shifted, if so to speak. Also, I want to say as far as like what do I do to kind of take care of myself. I think it's really important, especially for people in the movement, to learn how to shut down and shut off, because everything that, especially as a Black woman, everything you do in your day-to-day, everyday life is exactly what movement is about. And it's not like you can just stop being Black or stop being a woman, So understanding when you need to just say no and just shut down, because these lines are so interconnected or what have you, it can be difficult and trying at times, but learning when you need to just say like no, turn off Instagram, stop answering emails, sorry I can't be at this action, no I'm not doing any organizing today, no I can't fly out here, like you just need to know to say like I just can't, for my health and well-being. And I understand that it can be more difficult and trying for others depending on what your position is in this movement, but we have to learn to shut down and just shut off sometimes. So that's what I do to keep my head on straight. And
remember what we learned. There's more of us. So when you shut down, Latasha's got you, and every other leaders in the reproductive justice movement.
No, like we can't be everything for everyone. So just know when to step back is really great, and rely on other movement leaders. And then, Spark, we have a conference that we're putting on. We haven't even announced the dates yet, but just look out, on all of our social media and other platforms. We're on Instagram, Facebook. We have a YouTube channel. We're on SoundCloud, like everything. So Spark RJ now, or you can just look on our website, sparkrj.org, and just stay posted.
Thank you very much, and please join me in thanking a panel, and then we have one more action to do together. In honor of our honorary co-host here, I want to make sure that we all don't leave without remembering we're 2 weeks away from the most important vote that is going to come in the Senate, that it will determine generations, all of these issues that we talked about today. So in order to wrap up and honor Black Girl Magic and Excellence, I thought we would allow Senator Harris's words to stick with us.
Can you think of any laws that give government the power to make decisions about the male body?
I'm not thinking of any right now, Senator.
So please text SCOTUS to 22422 as you leave today. Make sure that you are engaging and talking to senators and engaging your communities about this important vote. This is a policy conference. It is meant for you to take action and into movement. So thank our panelists today. Take all of these ideas home with you.